Good evening, Young Kings. Time for your more motivation this evening. Just got out of work, so figure I'd get on and kind of go through some more of these steps for self-discovery. Had a pretty productive day. Still, one of my goals is to be more productive at work, so I'm still growing in that because there's an element sometimes you can start operating on a high level and get on autopilot and become stagnant. But that desire for you to get better, for you to try to improve, that's a desire that you don't want to diminish. You always want to be on edge. So, and striving to be better than where you are today. So there's a quote that says, striving for perfection is demoralizing, but striving for excellence is motivating. We can never attain perfection. We've been disqualified from that from our date of birth. But you can have excellence without perfection. As a matter of fact, when I was going through flight school, and I was the only minority in class, and I was the senior ranking one in class as well. It was a difficult environment to operate in, not only academically but socially, and just not really fitting in to the culture that was in the classroom. But I remember one of the most impactful meetings I've had in my life came in that class by product of the Tuskegee Airmen, Lieutenant Colonel Carter. He came and visited the class, and I ended up getting a P-51 model. It's up here. Maybe I'll show it at the end of the video. But meeting him, and I had a chance to sit down with him and talk about some of the things that he experienced in flight school, because they were the first African-American pilots, kind of the test bed for pilots and stuff of that nature. And he taught me in a very short duration, in a very short conversation, he made a statement like, your only defense against ignorance is excellence. And he gave the example of when they went to get tested for the application to go into flight school. Everyone there had a high aptitude, and they scored extremely high on aptitude tests. And then it was so high that they questioned their integrity if they had cheated. So when they actually got to flight school, they tested them again just to make sure that the previous test wasn't compromised and that they weren't cheating, to confirm that they indeed did score that high. And he said they scored just as good on the second test, and some of them scored higher. And it kind of confirmed, and they said they were held to a standard of that because everybody looking at them was counting them out and was thinking that there was going to be a failed experiment. But he said, in talking with me, your only defense against ignorance is excellence. So people around you won't understand this journey, and some probably turn off this series, but it's not for them. This is for those who definitely desire to grow. And I'm not speaking as a person who has it together or a person who's teaching or leading this journey for you. I'm on this journey as well. I'm on this pilgrimage to become better, to become healed, to become healthy, become whole. And that's why the first battle of this Operation Lion King is the battle of self-discovery. And I think self-discovery is important because what are we looking for? Yourself. Finding out, for me, like finding out who I am. So this is not the operation, discovering a mate or getting a better job or all those things are ancillary things that may come later. But what we need to focus on is the self-discovery, and that discovery is of self. As I was driving today, few things happened. I was just kind of reflecting back over my life, and shout out to the people who reached out in various different forms to me, whether it be through phone call or through text. This journey is one that has to be traveled. It can't be eluded. It can't be wished it wasn't here. This is the reality. I know when I was going to Afghanistan, I had a sergeant major. They used to have a motto that says, embrace the suck. Like, don't wish it wasn't there. Embrace it. Know that it's coming. Get tough, get your grit on and, determination, and just fortify and push through it. Because if you think that it's not supposed to be this hard, when it's hard, it's going to discourage you. But if you know it's hard and you're expecting to be hard, then you're going to become harder. And there's a saying that says, don't pray and ask God to remove your problems and make your life easy. Pray to God and ask for strength to be able to endure a hard life. So that's where I'm going through, enduring and embracing the suck of this and becoming better. Like, I really realized, like, this, what I'm going through, is not just for me. It's not just so I can go through this so I can make a YouTube video about how I feel about it. This, I'm planting seeds for somebody else's deliverance, that I can be able to speak to with empathy and understanding and be able to reach them from a level of knowing what it feels like to be in a hard situation and still flourish. Kind of like I was going through some of my series, and the broken yet brilliant, the flourishing while frustrated, and then the walking wounded. And those were all things that I've talked about over this journey, over this last 8, 9, 10 months since I've been on this page. And those are all reflections of things that I've been through, and it's building me up to this point. So failure is not final. Success is not permanent. So just because you failed today doesn't mean that tomorrow is going to be a failure. And don't think because you succeeded today that tomorrow you're going to be successful. So it all depends on your intention. If you're intentional, then you can control that. Now, you can't control and wish that you never fail, because I think in failure, there's a lot of life lessons that's beneficial, that will contribute to our success later down the line. So one of the stories, as a young soldier, as I mentioned, I've been in the Army 26 years. I joined in 1994 as an infantryman. And there's this significant achievement as the EIB, Expert Infantry Badge. And I wanted this badge extremely bad. I mean, there's a lot of extra work you got to do. You got to be proficient in your warrior tasks and drills. And there's breaking down weapons, throwing hand grenades, setting up a claymore mine. There's first aid stuff. There's a road march. There's a fitness test. And it's just make sure that you're proficient at all the infantry basic tactics. And I wanted that badge bad. And I studied, and, a lot of people didn't want to do the extra work to get it, but I wanted it to show that I was a cut above all the other soldiers. And I didn't get it. And I remember going through the testing, and I failed it twice, 2 separate iterations that I failed to try to get this expert infantry badge. One of the instances, the grenade I threw, there's this perimeter that you got to get the grenade in, and then there's another one where you got to get the grenade in the hole. So my elimination round, I threw the grenade and it exploded before it rolled into the hole. So they disqualified me, and I was already a blade runner where I'd already had a mistake, so I didn't get it. And then the last time I went for it, it was the claymore mine. My angle, somebody, I call it badge protectors, but regardless of whoever it may be, you may not understand a lot of the military talk, but just understand that I gave it my all. I mean, that I really trained for it, I studied for it, and I gave it my all, and I came up short, and I didn't get it. Now, that didn't make me less of a soldier, even though I still, to this day, after 26 years, do not have an expert infantry badge. That was a period of time that I didn't earn that. So some people will take that as a mark of you wasn't a good soldier, this and that. But the reality of it is you can't win at everything. And it made me think of a moral story about an elephant. I was reading through a short moral story, and it talks about an elephant. Now, the elephant is one of the largest mammals outside of dinosaurs that roam this earth. They get up to like 13,000 pounds. And the thing about an elephant, man, it has an enormous memory. I mean, it remembers everything. So the way an elephant is able to be captured and contained in a local setting like a zoo is that they get an elephant while it's small, and they put a big chain around his leg. And the elephant, it'll start to try to get out of the chain, and it realizes that the chain is too big, is too strong, that it can't break free. Now, this is why the elephant is small. Now, when an elephant grows, it has already been conditioned that chain is too strong for it to break free. So it doesn't even try. It keeps itself in captivity. Like it has learned through its youth that, hey, you can only go this far. Like the chain is going to stop. And if your elephant was to really try, it can really break that chain. but his mind doesn't allow it to go beyond that resistance, beyond what it had previously went and failed at. So, and I was curious about that, because it's like, we all fail. We all fail. And some of us will get to a point where that chain of failure has is scarred us so much that we don't get to that stage where we now strong enough to be able to break through the chains. We don't even try. And I wanted to look up the size of the elephant brain. And the elephant brain, it's about 13 to 14 pounds. And although that seems small, that's like 4 times the size of a human brain. But in comparison to the size of the elephant, the elephant I just told you was 13,000 pounds, and his brain is only 13, 14 pounds. So that's like 0.001% of the mass of the elephant. But in that brain, it houses its limitations, it houses its restrictions, and it's preventing it from going forward. So in this self-discovery, you're going to have to realize and understand, like, are some chains around your feet, or is there some shackles on your arms that previously, where you were in a weakened state, that prevented you from becoming the true version of yourself? Is it still a barrier? Is the barrier really an obstacle because you can't get through? Or is it something mentally that's preventing you from getting through? And 9 times out of 10, I know for me, it's mental. Thinking, thinking traps that will prevent you from becoming better. Like for me, give you an example, I was a shooting guard in high school. And to me, I was like one of the best shooters. And I had a short memory when it comes to shooting the basketball. I had a motto, and my motto was, the next shot's the best shot. Like, I could miss 5, 6, 7 shots in a row, and that 8th shot, I thought I was going to make it, because it's just like I was a self-proclaimed shooter. And in reality, that's what we need to be in life. It's like, you got to take your shot, and those who are familiar with sports, when people get into shooting slumps, especially in basketball, you get into shooting slumps, a lot of times it becomes mental. That failure, that missed shot, and that missed opportunity starts to weigh on you. And you'll find yourself, and you'll see it in basketball, where some people, they'll pass up a shot they should have taken because they lost confidence that they're in their ability to make it. And that's why you'll see some who go to the free throw line or get a layup, just getting the ideal of the ball going into the baskets rejuvenates them, to get them the energy to build up their confidence. So as young kings, as we go through the self-discovery, we're going to have to recognize some of those barriers and boundaries and some of those mental things that has prevented us from becoming the true version of ourselves. And I'm not an advocate for forgetting, because I think, like, my mental, I remember a lot. And I'll be honest, this last instance with this marriage, it feels like failure. And I have to remind myself I'm not a failure. Like, I'm going to rebound, and I have rebounded, and will be better as a result of going through that. So some things, my little nephew sent me a video of David Goggins. If you haven't checked out his book, You Can't Hurt Me, that's an extremely powerful book of a man who went through a lot of adversity in his childhood, early adulthood, and adult life, and just was able to overcome it. And now he's a motivational speaker and stuff of that nature. He has a book out there. So shout out to Brian Jr. On sending me that video. And that was like, that book is what really got me through the end of 2019 and 2020. Some of the lessons learned and that he observed, and just be able to fortify your mind and become better. So although some of you may think this is a long intro, this is all about the self-discovery and figuring out what are your limits and what are your boundaries, and how do you go about removing those things so you can make sure you can process and proceed further than where you currently are. Because that's the growth. That's the ideal of self-discovery. It's like being true to yourself, like being unified in who you are in all situations. Because some of us, and I've been guilty of it too, we compartmentalize our personality, or what we show as an expression of who we are. Like, we're one way at work, and then we're one way with this group of friends. We're one way when we're with our significant other, we're one way with kids, and we got this compartmentalized of lessons of when it's okay to be us. And this is an invitation for you to be unified in you, and for you to be that way throughout each of those individual things. Now, there may be areas in those respective relationships that you need to grow and mature, and maybe decide what's appropriate to share in different things. Like, you're not going to be intimate with people at work as you would be your significant other. So there are the boundaries and stuff of that nature, but to be unified so you can be wholly you, because the only way you can love others is if you first love yourself. So go back if you haven't got the first few steps, and we're going to continue on. So step 4, in the self-discovery, as we find out who we are, we got to do an assessment, and that assessment is for us to evaluate our skills. So step 4 is for us to evaluate our skills and to determine what it is that we are good at. You know, what is that drives us? What are our unique capabilities? And I give an example. My older brother, Brian, was naturally mechanically inclined. Like, his brain grasps the different mechanics and boats and stuff of that nature, even from a young age. Before he had formal training on it, he had a desire and a unique ability to go and manipulate and fix different things. And I remember, and I think I shared it in the video before, my mom had a cutlass, and one day I'm coming home and this guy got the engine tore apart, just fixing things, just pulling stuff off. And I was like, man, how you going to get that stuff back in? And, you know, he had to have been like maybe 15, 16. You know, he hadn't had any formal training other than, I think he was in auto tech in high school, and they gave him some introductory stuff. But he said, I just remember where it came from, and I'm going to put it back. In my mind, that car would have never worked again. You know, that car wasn't going to work again. And if it had been left up to me, the car wouldn't have worked again, because I didn't have a mind to be able to grasp that. But that was one of his unique skill sets that he had. And as he evolved through life, like, he went and got formal training. He's a master mechanic, A+ certified, and just now he's feeding his family and being prosperous of it. But that's when you got to evaluate your skills. Like, what is it that you are uniquely good at? Like, I have an ability with situations to see them see it in an abstract version. Like, I can look at something and I can interpret it in a way that, you know, it may be abstract to somebody. Like, oh, I never thought about that. And it just, it's a God-given talent, whether it be in scripture, whether it be in the way I view the trees and whatever it may be. My mind is very abstract, so that is definitely a skill that I have. So defining what your unique abilities are is going to be critical to being your unique self and part of this self-discovery. Because what you don't want to do is place yourself in a place where you're not prospering or advancing. And that's not going to be beneficial to you or the people around you. You need to find out where your skills at are, and then place yourself in that. Because and when I was going for my master's degree, they had the SWOT analysis, SWOT, SWOT, and it was an acronym, and it stood for strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats. So when you do your assessment on yourself, you know, you got to figure out what are your strengths, you know, what are you good at, you know, what are your weaknesses, what are some things that you're vulnerable for, what are some opportunities that you could utilize your strengths while minimizing your weakness, and then what are some threats, what are some vulnerable areas that you have in your life that may leave you blindsided to something. So if you have that SWOT analysis of yourself, then you can be able to manipulate and put yourself in positions that's going to be prosperous for you. So if you haven't done a SWOT analysis, then that's maybe something that you need to do, because honing your skills is going to give you more confidence. Like, the better you develop, the more confidence that you will become at that particular thing. And that's why we call a SME, you know, SME, a subject matter expert. It's because they have studied with it, whatever that particular area is, and they have developed a depth of knowledge about that subject, and they have done the research. So when it comes to it, they become an expert in that field. And that's where you got to find out where it is that you can be an expert at. So in order to do that, the next step is that you got to ask yourself some questions. And I always had a saying, like, questions is the bridge from it provides clarity out of confusion. Like if you're confused, then you should be able to ask some questions so you can get clarity. Make sure that you understand something. So you got to ask yourself some questions. And one of the questions is, why do I do the things I do? And this is going to help you understand yourself. Like, what is your motive behind the things you do? Because the motives will determine a lot. Like, understanding what your motives are, and just question yourself. You don't have to do this in public. If you respond to something, whether it be positive or negative, sit back and ask yourself in a quiet moment, like, hey, why did I respond that way? Is that really who I am? What about that elicited a response from me? Because I know I have a tendency of responding, and I got to learn not to start. I got to be going on emotional intelligence. And we're going to do a whole series probably on emotional intelligence, because I think EQ, which is emotional intelligence, is just as important as IQ, if not more so. So we'll come back and we'll visit emotional intelligence, because that's definitely an area that I want to develop in. So you got to ask yourself, why do I do the things I do? And then what drives me? Like, what is my passion? What is my purpose? How am I going to be connected to that? How do I advance a cause and become better than what I am today? So what drives me? And then ask yourself, like, what are you missing? Like, is there anything like that is missing out of your complete self? Like, what is not there? What would you want to be there? And this is the opportunity for you to be able to understand and assess yourself, where your shortcomings are. Like, I have a desire to write a book, but I know that my writing skills, and I'm just going to write it and then probably push it off to a publisher or something. But I understand there's some additional information that I need to get on that. And then the last question is, what kind of impact do my choices have on the life I want? Like, you can't have a disconnect between what you want and the work and that it takes to get there. Those two got to be married. Like, you got to have enough drive and determination and work to get to match to where you want to be. Like, you can't say that you want to be in better shape, but then you never work out. The two are not on the same path. You can't say that you want to be better in a particular area, but you're not studying and you're not increasing your knowledge. You're not going to do some research, getting some additional information. So what you want and what you do, they have to be connected. There got to be some choices that are aligned with that. So the next step is 6, is being able to identify what you value. And I had some talks with one of my best friend Eric today on this about values. And one way I want to make sure I word this right. If you don't understand what you value, then you will find yourself compromising not only your values but others. Like, this is really important, because it's about identifying you specifically and things that you hold near and dear. Because once you have those things established, that will shape every interaction you have. It will shape how you interact at work, in a relationship, with a spouse, with kids. Like, what do you value? So honesty, compassion, loyalty, creativity, courage, intelligence. Like, what is it that really is like the cornerstone signature thing for you to be known for? Because let's go on loyalty. And this was what me and Eric was talking about today. So you're getting an overflow of some things we talked about. You may say that's extremely important, and as my friend Eric indicated, but it's deeper than that. Because what are you loyal to? And is that loyalty beneficial? Like, there's situations and circumstances that someone will call disloyal, but you being loyal may be a detriment to you. Meaning, like, let's say you're working at this place and it's a decent job, and you've been going there faithfully, and they're paying you $8.75 an hour, and you loyal to them. Would it be disloyal to say, you know what, I want to better myself and there's another opportunity for me to make $16, $20 an hour? So you got to make sure that what you're loyal to is in line with who you are. To be transparent, I was in a relationship 25 years with my ex, and I committed adultery. So you can say I wasn't loyal. And I realized, like, in that process of doing that, I wasn't. And that's an indictment on me as an individual and as a person. But what I realized more than that is that I wasn't loyal to myself. There were things that I was missing in that relationship that I should have never had let it get to that point. But I compromised everything that I thought meant something to me, that I thought I could write off and I can just endure it. Like, hey, it doesn't mean nothing to me. I'm just gonna go through to get through. So if you're not true to yourself, forget everybody else. You're not cheating on anybody else. You're cheating first, especially if you're married, like I was. The first attack is on God. Like when David was caught cheating with Bathsheba, those who don't know the story, you can go back and read it. But when he repented, he had to repent to God. He said, "Forgive me, God, I sinned against you." He didn't go back to the woman and say, "Hey, will you forgive me?" And I'm sure there's an element of that happened, but in essence, that he interrupted his communion with God. So there's an element of that. But there, in my situation, was an element of, like, I cheated myself during the full 25 years of that marriage by settling for something less than I knew I wanted, because I didn't know myself. There's one thing to settle for, what's available versus what you want. Like if you're not complete with yourself, then you're just going to be accepting. If you don't really have yourself established, then you're just going to be accepting what anybody give you. And sometimes what they give you may be less than what you need in order for you to be healthy, happy, and whole. So what do you do if there's a deficit? And that's why I'm saying this self-discovery is important, so you can be able to communicate when that deficit occurs. Because there were some things that I should have addressed probably at year 1 and 2 that made its way and grew into adult problems at year 25. And that's why I got to be careful now, because even in my healing, I think I'm over addressing things. Like if I see what I think could be a red flag, it's time for a conversation. I think I got to kind of be balanced in there as I'm healing things and I'm moving on and progressing in a new relationship, that I don't let the scars of my past end up wounding my present and my future. So, like, that is a chain that was around the infant elephant of my life. And now that I'm adult, I'm able to break shackles, and break these chains. I got to make sure that I don't allow those things to hold me back. So the premise behind this self-discovery is for you to become your authentic version of you, because what we got to realize as young king is, like, we are enough. We are enough. Like when going back to the Lion King and Operation Lion King, when Simba was raised up as anointed as one of the next kings, he hadn't grown into that. He hadn't earned any of that. It was bestowed upon him by birth. And as I mentioned before, it's like God has told us, like, we were created in his image. So we're going on 30 minutes, and I do want to kind of, I told you I was going to come back to this scripture in Luke regarding Yeshua going out and teaching them and fishing. So Luke chapter 5 and verse 3, and it says, "And he got into the boat, which was Simon's, and he asked them to put out a little ways from the land." So the first thing is about this is, like, you got to realize these men have been fishing all night, but they've been fishing on their own. And on their own, they found failure. they found defeat. And these are people who are experts in their craft. These are not novice just going out trying to get some food. This is what they do for a living. And on their own, they found failure. But it says, like, when Yeshua, he got in the boat, in Simon's boat, and he asked them to push out a little from the land. So he says, hey, look, you all have this shallow understanding of what's going on. I need to take y'all a little deeper into what really needs to happen. So he says, and he pushed her out from the land, and he sat down and he began to teach them, the people from the boat. So in pushing out into the deep, he said there's a deficit between what you know and what you need in order to be successful. So he's going to teach him some things. And when he had began speaking, he said to Simon, put out into the deep waters and let down your net for the catch. So, and then Simon answered and said, Master, we have worked all night and have caught nothing, but I will do as you say and let down the nets. So, and we're going to come back to this, and we're over 30 minutes. And I just think it's important because these men were fresh off failure. They weren't fresh off catching, the stock of, the catch of the lies and, and success. They were fresh out of that failure moment. And what do you do out of that failure moment? Like, what do you do? Like, you didn't try everything. I'm sure they weren't just out there twiddling their thumbs. They manipulated stuff based off their experiences and stuff of that nature, and they still came up short. But in the end, when they were coming back, they didn't have anything. But on the way back, in the midst of failure, Yeshua was coming up. So after you fail, what do? You got to have the Most High come in and reteach you some things. And that's where I'm at in my life. It's like I got to push a little away from the water, from the edge and go a little deep and cast my net again. And, even though I failed before, failure is not final, and neither is success. So what I do from this point forward in this self-discovery, in this Operation Self-Discovery, the cure to my identity crisis, because a lot of people want you to be identified by your mistakes. And a lot of people will try to associate your mistakes with who you are. The first thing they'll bring up is something you did wrong. And, every time somebody talked to me, and they may be disappointed with me, they'll try to point at something I did wrong. Like, you got to get strong enough, young king, where you're not moved by that. Don't let your mistakes hurt, hinder you. Don't let your mistakes hold your future hostage. Break free. You're no longer that elephant. You didn't grow a lot. You didn't mature a lot. It's time for you to not forget to the point where you repress something, but you got to understand, like, there's a new version of you and that it's okay to be you. So I'm going to stop there, just going over 33 minutes, and I'll come back again shortly. We'll finish this up. And then I'm going to go over some questions. I think it's like 50 something of them on how do we become the best version of ourselves. So have a great day, young kings. It's okay to be you. You are enough. Even though you made mistakes, we're growing. We're failing forward, meaning like we're learning from our mistakes. We're going to get better. We're going to improve. And don't let nobody make you think you less than a king. Be great, young kings.